Imagine you invented a game. You wrote the rules. You owned the board, and for 70 years, everyone played it your way, whether they wanted to or not. Now imagine some of the players started quietly making their own board, same game, different rules, and nobody sent you an invitation. That is, more or less, what is happening to the US dollar right now. Not a crash, not a collapse, something slower, quieter, and in some ways more dangerous. A shift, a gradual redistribution of financial gravity. And the uncomfortable part is, it has been building for decades, and most people only started paying attention when it was already well underway. So let us talk about how the dollar became the world's reserve currency, why that status made America extraordinarily powerful, and why that power is, piece by piece, beginning to erode. It starts in 1944. The Second World War is winding down. 44 nations send delegates to a resort in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The world's financial system is in ruins. Somebody needs to anchor it. And the United States, the only major economy that came out of the war stronger than it went in, raises its hand. The deal they struck was elegant and ruthless in equal measure. Every major currency would be pegged to the dollar. The dollar, in turn, would be pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. America held most of the world's gold anyway, so in a single agreement, the US dollar became the foundation of the entire global economy. Every country that wanted to trade internationally needed dollars. Every barrel of oil, every cargo ship, every bond market, priced in dollars, settled in dollars, dependent on dollars. Economists call this exorbitant privilege. That is not a metaphor, that is the actual term, and it fits, because what it meant was that America could print money, borrow cheaply, run deficits that would cripple any other country, and export its inflation to the rest of the world. Other nations absorbed the consequences. America absorbed the benefits. For a while, everyone accepted this arrangement, because what was the alternative? Here's where it gets interesting. In 1971, Nixon broke the gold peg. Officially, dollars were no longer convertible to gold. The entire theoretical foundation of Bretton Woods gone. And yet, the dollar did not fall. It became more dominant, because by that point, the world was so deeply wired into dollar infrastructure that there was no realistic exit. Trade was denominated in dollars. Foreign reserves were held in dollars. International debt was issued in dollars. The SWIFT banking system, the one that connects nearly every financial institution on Earth, ran through dollar-denominated rails. The dollar had become less of a currency and more of an operating system. You could complain about it, you could resent it, but you could not simply uninstall it. And this is the thing that is easy to miss when people talk about dollar dominance today. The question was never whether other countries liked the arrangement. They mostly did not. The question was whether they had the infrastructure, the trust, and the coordination to build something else. For most of the last 50 years, the answer was no. That answer is changing. Not all at once, not dramatically, but the data is there if you look. In 2001, the dollar accounted for roughly 73% of global foreign exchange reserves. By 2023, that number had dropped to under 60%. 15 percentage points in 2 decades. That sounds modest. At the scale of global finance, it's enormous. China has been building bilateral trade agreements that bypass the dollar entirely. The yuan is now used to settle oil trades between China and Saudi Arabia, trades that historically would have required dollars as an intermediary. Russia, after being cut off from SWIFT following the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, began routing transactions through alternative systems. The sanctions that were designed to isolate Moscow also demonstrated vividly that SWIFT and the dollar could be used as weapons. And every country watching took notes. Brazil and China began settling trade directly in their own currencies. India is exploring rupee-denominated oil purchases. The BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and a growing list of new members, has had increasingly serious conversations about a shared settlement currency. Whether that materializes is another question, but the conversation itself would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. Now, here's the part that tends to get lost in the noise. None of this means the dollar is about to collapse. That framing is usually wrong and often motivated. The dollar remains, by a wide margin, the dominant reserve currency. The U.S. Treasury market is still the deepest, most liquid financial market in the world. When global investors get scared, and they do regularly, they still run towards dollars, not away from them. But dominance is not binary. You don't go from number 1 to 0. You go from indispensable to merely important, from essential to one option among several. And that transition, even if it takes another 20 or 30 years to complete, has real consequences. When the dollar is indispensable, America borrows cheaply. Interest rates stay lower than they otherwise would. Deficits are more sustainable. Military spending, foreign policy, economic stimulus, all of it is partially subsidized by the world's willingness to hold dollars. When that willingness declines, even gradually, the subsidy shrinks. The bills come due, not all at once, but they come. There's a quiet irony buried in all of this. The very actions that have accelerated dollar skepticism, using financial sanctions as geopolitical leverage, running persistent and expanding deficits, weaponizing access to the global banking system, each one made sense in the short term. Collectively, they gave dozens of countries a compelling reason to find an exit. You don't build an alternative to the dollar because you have a better ideology. You build it because you want options, because you don't want to be one presidential signature away from being locked out of the global financial system. That is the logic driving this shift, not ideology, risk management. So where does this end? Honestly, nobody knows, not with confidence. The dollar could stabilize and retain its dominance for another generation if the U.S. addresses its fiscal trajectory and maintains geopolitical credibility. Or the current trajectory continues, and we move towards a messier, more fragmented world of competing reserve currencies. The dollar, the yuan, maybe a digital alternative backed by a basket of commodities. What is clear is this. The architecture of global finance that was designed in a New Hampshire resort in 1944 was built for a world that no longer exists. The question is not whether it changes, it's how fast and who controls the terms. The United States built the board, set the rules, and for 70 years everyone played along. Some of them have stopped asking for permission.